guys, welcome back to my channel, Giovanna Reads. My name is Giovanna, and today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up. In the month of February, I actually read 6 books, which is quite a lot for me considering I normally only read about 3 books a month because I have no time. But I did read 6 books this month, which I'm really proud of. And the way that this video is going to be structured is I'm going to start with my least favorite books to my top favorite books according to rating. And if you see me looking over here, it's because that's where my laptop is. That's where I have all my notes about all the books and everything, so I hope you don't mind. Also, I'm still working on the lighting filming situation. I only can film with natural light, and because I wear glasses, it is a struggle and I'm bothered by it. So I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Hopefully the next couple of videos we have it figured out. But without further ado, let's get to the point of the video, what you're all here for anyway. So starting with 3-star books, the first 3-star book that I read was One Small Thing by Erin Watt. And this book I did talk about actually in my new to Booktube tag, but it is a book about a girl named Beth whose sister was recently killed in an accident. And due to that, her parents have become very, very overprotective of her. And so she's having to learn how to navigate that relationship and basically having any sense of freedom taken away from her. But she does happen to sneak out one night and she goes to a party and she meets this boy named Chase. They hit it off, they hook up. She thinks she's found a new secret friend that she can confide in, only to find out that he shows up at her school the next day because he's a new student to their school. And over the course of the book, you learn about Chase's role in Beth's sister's murder and what really happened to her that night. This book wasn't anything spectacular. It didn't bring anything new to the table. I did appreciate her and Chase's relationship. Due to the nature of the book, it could come across kind of weird. That's how I kind of felt at first, but Chase is very hesitant to even be friends with her, let alone talk to her, because of his role in her sister's death. And they're both kind of grappling with that, but their budding friendship / relationship is actually quite acceptable for YA, and I'll just leave it at that. The next book that I read was Fangirl by Ramble. I will leave a link to my Goodreads review down below because it was a hefty one and I don't want to take up too much of your time going on a bunch of rants. But one thing to note, I have not done it on Goodreads yet, but I will make sure to do that, is I did bump up my rating to a 3 stars. Originally it was a 2.5 because I had some problems and I still do, but one of my biggest problems with the book was Ren, Kat's sister. So backing up, if you don't know what this book is about, it is about a girl named Kath who is a twin, her twin sister Ren. They're both going into their first year of college, but the book primarily focuses on Kath and her involvement in fangirl fiction. She writes for, I don't remember the actual name of the series, but the characters' name are Simon and Baz, and she's very invested. She writes fan fiction for that. She's very popular on the internet, and it's kind of just following her through her first year in college. Outside of like the fangirl side of things, it does touch a lot on like friendship and like family drama and things of that nature, but I do feel like the main purpose of this book was about her fan fiction, and it kind of bothered me because there was all of these other important topics going on in the book, but they were kind of like background noise while her Simon and Baz fan fiction was at the forefront. And my honest opinion is I feel like fangirl only exists so Carry On can exist, and without fangirl, Carry On wouldn't exist. And I have a really big problem with that because the whole story of Simon and Baz took away from what I think any major lessons could have came out of this story, and I didn't like that. And I also just wasn't a fan of the Simon and Baz story. I didn't care. I fast forwarded through it in the audiobook. Every time it came on, I was like, I don't care. And because I didn't care, I have no interest in picking up Carry On. So positives, before we get into the negatives, is I really did enjoy Rainbow Rowell's writing. I understand why people love her and love her books. She knows how to craft a story. She knows how to really engage you in it and like wrap you in the story and make you want to learn what's going on and what's happening and how things are going to unfold, because that's how I felt with this book. I honestly thought in the first 30 or 40%, this was going to be a 5-star read for me. I was super in love with the story. I loved what was going on. I was head over heels in love with it. And then all of the problems with her family started happening, and her sister started happening, and the book just took a turn from the worst. And I didn't like the way that certain situations were handled. I'm not going to go into every little situation that happened, but I really didn't like the way that Rainbow Rowell handled the topic of mental health, let alone the family drama wasn't really resolved. And not that I need to have a bow on it, but I just felt like there was some issues that weren't resolved in the end, and that ending was yikes. But on to what I disliked. I'm only going to talk on this one thing because this is why I bumped my rating up, even though I still think Ren is an ass. But in the book, you get an obvious sense that Ren kind of wants to like distance herself from Kath. Yes, they're twins, they've done everything together, they've probably taken all their classes together, but college is a place for you to explore your individuality. And I think that was why Ren didn't want to live in the same dorm with her sister, why she wanted to make her own friends and do her own thing. Totally understand that, but her attitude about it was just very poor and very annoying. She kind of treated Kath as if every time she was around or she called her, as if she was a burden or like this annoying person that wouldn't go away. And I really didn't like that, because it's like, I get you want your space and want to do your own thing, but she's your sister. And so I didn't understand why she treated her like that. But as you go through the story, you kind of learn that at the beginning of them going into college, that their mother Lauren kind of came back into the picture. Now Lauren left them when they were 8 years old and they were raised by their father, and then all of a sudden 10 years later she decides, oh, I want to be a mom again. And you can only imagine what kind of state of mind both of them were in. Obviously Kath was less interested in that, but Ren kind of wanted to try to have a relationship with her mom, and I think because of that caused Ren to be under a lot of stress, and because of that she snapped at her sister a lot because they had different opinions on the relationship with her mom. And I don't think that Ren handled it well, but I also think that Ren developed her drinking problem because of that. And that is not a spoiler because she drinks a lot throughout the book. I'm not going to touch on anything else further than that. But I think her actions and her coping mechanisms make sense given the situation that she was in. And I think if you look at it from their perspective, like what Ren was going through and why she was acting the way that you do, you don't hate her as much, but you still hate her. I mean, obviously speaking, her actions don't excuse the way that she treated her sister, but it does give some sort of insight to maybe what was going on in the head of Ren. So because of that, my reflection on it, I did bump my rating up to 3 stars. But I still had a hell of a lot of issues with this book. I will leave my Goodreads review down below because it's quite long. Moving on. Going on to the 4-star reads. The first one is I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara. Now, if you don't know who Michelle McNamara is, she is Patton Oswalt's late wife who died back in 2016, I think. And this book is kind of, it's pieced together by people who wrote the book, but essentially it's like different journal entries from her and her case files that she accumulated. And then they kind of fill in the gaps based off of the research because she did die in the middle of concocting this case and bringing light back to the Golden State Killer, if you will. But I did enjoy it. It did take me a month to read. And not because it wasn't interesting, but because it is so information heavy and dense. It just didn't keep me engaged enough to pick it up on a consistent basis. Like I found other audiobooks that were like much quicker to get through for me. But I did enjoy the book. I do think that if you are a true crime fan, that you should definitely pick this up. It was a solid 4-star read for me. I think anybody could enjoy it and get through it. My one complaint And I saw this in Katie's video from Chapter Stacks. I'll leave her channel link down below. She did a review on this. And apparently it's not just in the audiobook, but it's in the physical book. But the timeline bounced around a lot. And I think in the physical book, it doesn't even like have like titles to like let you know that they're jumping back. It just kind of does it. And so sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about the timeline and where you're at. And you have to like re-listen to things a couple of times, which I didn't like. So it kind of made it a little bit difficult to keep up with the storyline. And they also called him different things throughout the book. So that made it a little bit difficult. But overall, I would say if you like true crime, pick it up. It was a solid 4-star reads for me. The next book that I read was a sad one, and it was Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was my second Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I read After I Do in January, 5 stars. One of my new all-time favorite books ever. I love that, but that book was about love and relationships, and Forever Interrupted is about grief, and it is sad. It is so, so sad. So this book is about the story of Elsie and Ben, who were together for 6 months before they decided to get married. And after only being married for 10 days, Ben is hit by a truck while riding on his bicycle, actually right down the road from their apartment complex. So that was really hard. Like, that's like in the first couple of pages of the book. It was really sad. But the story kind of follows that once Ben's body is transferred to the hospital, Elsie ends up meeting her mother-in-law, Susan, for the very first time. Neither one of them ever met. Susan actually had no idea that Elsie even exists and really grappled with whether or not this woman was really her son's wife and if they really had a marriage or anything like that. And so obviously both of these women who love this man so much are grappling with grief, and it's even a little bit more difficult for Susan because she's still dealing with the death of her husband from several years earlier. The book really does focus on Elsie's grief and her coming to terms with Ben's death, and also the pain of guilt that she feels because she felt guilty. I'm just gonna say that. But it also talks about the blossoming relationship between her and Susan, because while they got off on their own foot, these women really hated each other. They went toe to toe about what to do with his belongings, what to do with his body, and everything like that. Over time, they really did start to form a relationship, and that was really sweet to see, especially because Susan, in my opinion, was a much better mother to Elsie than Elsie's own mother was. Like, her parents just weren't the most supportive people, and it really kind of sucked to read those parts of the book. You do also get a ton of flashbacks to the beginning of Elsie and Ben's relationship, like the first night that they met, kind of through their relationship, when and why they decided to get married, which was just really cute and sweet to get a sense of like how in love they were, which was sweet to read about, but also just made his death that much more depressing to read about, because it's like you have this cute couple that's so in love and wants to be together and are so ready to get their life started, and it's cut short really, really soon. So that was really difficult to read about. I did rate this a 4.5, and the only reason why I kind of knocked down half a star is there was a unexpected surprise, not so surprise in the book that I wasn't a fan of. If you read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I didn't really like that. And I also really hated the whole conflict around their marriage license. This is not a spoiler to anybody, but if you get married in a different state and you file for your marriage license in a different state, your marriage license is not going to come from the state that you live in. It's going to come from the state that you got married in. And this was an issue in the book. Hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler, but they got married somewhere else, and she's waiting for that marriage certificate to come in, because that's the only way that she can prove that they're actually married, is that she needs documentation, and she's waiting for it, and it's not coming. But that's because she didn't connect the dots, and she thought it was coming from Orange County, but they didn't get married in Orange County, so obviously her marriage license is not coming from Orange County. But that really bothered me, because I was like really pissed when we get an explanation for why she hasn't gotten it, and it was just like, girl, really? You didn't figure that out like a long time ago? Like, even before Ben died, that should have been like an obvious thing, but maybe it's not. I don't know. That really annoyed the crap out of me, but it's not that big of a deal. But I just couldn't do it. It annoyed me. Anyway, the next book that I read was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, and I gave this book a 4.75. I really liked this book. Like, wow. At first, I wasn't really feeling it. I was like, I don't know. But overall, I really did enjoy the book. If you don't know, this book is about the Lee family, who is a Chinese American family living in a small town in Ohio during the 1970s. And they have 3 kids, Nathan being the oldest, Lydia being the middle child, and Hannah being the youngest. Lydia is the star of the family, the favorite, the prodigy, whatever you want to call it. Her parents are constantly pressuring her into being the best version of what they think she should be. On the mom's side, she really wants her to become a doctor. She wants her to focus on her grades, get into a good school, make something of herself. And her dad really just wants her to be popular and have a lot of friends. Both of the parents are kind of inflicting their own expectations onto her, and you kind of explore how that affected Lydia, and also whether or not the parents think that they had something to do with her dying. That's not a spoiler. It's like literally the first sentence of the synopsis of the book. But yes, Lydia does die, and it kind of explores the family coming to terms with her death, whether or not they agree with the cops' final decision of ruling it as a suicide. The family doesn't think that it is, and it's really difficult for them to come to terms with. So you kind of explore the family in current day dealing with the death of Lydia, and also past of like how the parents met, getting pregnant, how that affected their careers, and moving to Ohio and living in White Town, Ohio, in a very small place, and being the only Chinese American family there, and kind of talking about, you get an insight to how much pressure Lydia was under, and kind of how that plays into her death, essentially. Some of the things that I really liked outside of just like getting to know the family, well, that was like the main thing I really liked. I really liked getting to understand the family dynamic in their past and how they got to be where they are. I really liked the topic of talking about race in this book. I've never read essentially a book about a Chinese American family, and that was really fascinating to me because I like reading about other cultures different than mine, so I try to be as much a diverse reader as I can be, and I really like that aspect of it. Especially for a book set in the 1970s, you don't really think about the struggles that Asian people went through during that time, but this book really explores that in a very real and relatable way. So I thought that was really well done. But I also thought it was interesting, this is like a side tangent, but I thought it was really interesting that Lydia happened to be the star of the family, because from a psychological standpoint and a society standpoint of what we know about families is normally the middle child is like the black sheep of the family, and no one really cares about them. They are kind of like the forgotten child in the group of kids. And I thought it was interesting that Celeste Ng chose Lydia to be the star of the book in terms of favoritism amongst the parents, because normally it's the oldest child that is like all the expectations are on, and then you want your younger kids to follow suit. But in this terms, it was like Nathan's the oldest, he was kind of forgotten about, and poor Hannah got zero attention. It's almost like she was just a person sitting at their dinner table. Like, they didn't talk to her, they didn't acknowledge her, they didn't do anything with her. So I just thought it was kind of interesting the way in which the family dynamic was crafted, and the child that Celeste Ng chose to be the prodigy of the family. I thought that was really interesting. I love the themes of the book. I will say though, the ending of the book, when you find out what happens to Lydia, literally broke me. I am not someone who normally cries during a book. I mean, I'm a crier in general, but for some reason I don't cry while reading books. But this book really really broke me. Like, it was just heartbreaking to read about what happened to her. And Celeste Ng knows how to write a fucking book, y'all. Like, I get it. I get why people love her. It makes me even more excited to read Little Fires Everywhere. So yeah, we're gonna move on from the sadness. We're gonna end on a high note. My favorite book of the month, a book that is gonna be on my favorites of the year video list, whatever, and it's also a new favorite book of all time, which is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. This book is so good, like so good, and everyone needs to read it. Literally everyone needs to read this book. Okay, so this book follows Tanner and Sebastian. Tanner is a bisexual who grew up in California with his family, and back in California he was out as bisexual. He was very open about it, wasn't a problem. But due to his mom's new job opportunity, they end up packing up and moving to Provo, Utah, which is like the Mormon capital of Utah. Like, that's like where their main big temple is and everything. And because of this move, Tanner is kind of forced to going back into the closet and hiding his sexuality, and his parents don't want him telling anyone that he's bisexual unless he feels that he can 100% trust them with that information. And at the beginning of the book, it's their senior year, and Tanner's best friend Autumn convinces him to enroll in the seminar class where you are expected to outline, draft, and write an entire book by the end of the semester. And with that enters Sebastian, and Sebastian decides to be a TA for the class because he actually was in the class the year prior, and his book actually got picked up for publication, and he's in the process of getting everything for his tour ready for the book to be released. And so he decides to be a TA to kind of help other students hopefully accomplish the same thing that he did. And you could tell as soon as those two are in the same room, there's some sort of connection. They meet eyes, sparks are flying in Tanner's head a little bit, and it's just so cute. But the problem is Sebastian is a Mormon, and he comes from a very, very devout Mormon family. I think his dad is a bishop, actually. His mom is your typical stay-at-home mom. And that does create some complications for their relationship, and it's really exploring the line between sexuality and religion. I will say the one thing I really appreciated that Christina Lauren did was, while they talked about religion, they did not demonize religion, which I think is a very difficult thing not to do when writing about religion in the aspects of like sexuality and even race at times and women's bodies and topics of that nature. So I think Christina Lauren did a very wonderful job teetering that line of the subject matter. I also just really loved Tanner's family. Tanner's parents are like parent goals. They are just some of the most heartwarming, loving people, and are a prime example of how you should be a parent, which is loving your child unconditionally, no matter who they are as a person. You accept them and you love them and you support them. And that's what Tanner's family did. But it also made it really difficult reading about Sebastian's life and how he's also coming to terms with his own sexuality and accepting the fact that he's gay, and also accepting that fact, being in a Mormon family, and kind of what his role is in that. And it was really, really difficult to read about his family life. Like, it was really sad, to say the least. That's not even the right word. It's an understatement of how sad it was. But I really liked the contrast between the two, but I also just loved reading about those moments between Tanner and Sebastian because they were so tender and they were so sweet. I mean, the first time that they held hands and kissed, I swooned. It was so sweet. It was so sweet and so cute, and I just want to protect Sebastian with my whole life. Like, I just want to come and give him like the biggest hug and just love on him because he needs all of it, and he's just a cute little bean, and I love him. I also think one of the important takeaways from this book, outside of like coming to terms with your sexuality and how sexuality and and religion intertwined together, it also talked a lot about friendship and communication. A lot of the times we think that communication is only important in like intimate relationships. We don't really think about it in terms like relationships with our friends. And this book really talks about that, because Tanner ends up neglecting his friendship with Autumn because he doesn't communicate with her about what's going on in his life, and neither one of them are talking all that often. They kind of get distant a little bit in the book, but it really talks about trust in your friends and communicating with your friends and making sure that you also are being the best friend that you can be to someone else despite what you're going through yourself. Because we all need our friends to be there. We need to respect what our friends are going through, but we also need to be there for them and listen to them and not let things interfere just because we don't know how to communicate our feelings about things and what we're going through. So that was a really tender moment lesson in the book, and I really appreciate that. But I'm just gonna say everyone needs to read this book. I will also leave 2 very well thought out and important reviews of this book, from Cece from Problems of a Book Nerd, and also from Melanie from Mel to the Annie. Cece is queer and she grew up Mormon. She grew up in Utah. She still lives in Utah, and she kind of gave a little bit more of a personal reason as to why she really resonated with this book and how impactful it was for her. Same thing for Melanie. Melanie is not Mormon, but I know she's part of the LGBTQ community, but she grew up Catholic, so she has her own insights about her sexuality and growing up Catholic and things like that. They both had really solid reviews, and I think are really important reviews, especially because they both got a little bit more personal about their lives in that review, while making connections to the story and why it was good and all of that. So I'll make sure to leave those Goodreads reviews down below for you all to read. But that's it. That is my official first February wrap up ever, and I'm so excited. I think I did okay. I hope I did okay. But anyway, that was my wrap up for the month of February. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to have links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, my Curious Cat down below if you want to contact me and be friends on those platforms. And if you have any suggestions about changing up the background, figure out lighting, editing, anything, feel free to leave a comment down below. I will take any criticism and help that I can get to make these a little bit better. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!